Hello, Symposiast. I'm Dr. Angela Puka, Religious Studies PhD and University Lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. Today, we are answering a very difficult question. Is magic evil? And what does it even mean for something to be evil? So, we're going to get all philosophical today. I hope you enjoy philosophy because that's what's going to happen. And you grab a snack and drink. So, let's start this philosophical adventure together and discuss whether magic is evil or not. Well, we need to say first that the association between magic and evil is a historically and culturally specific construct that is influenced by theology, philosophy, and power dynamics. Magic, broadly defined as practices aimed at influencing the spiritual or material world, has often been labeled heretical or malevolent when it diverged from dominant religious norms. Scholars like Kiekefer and Bailey highlight that these distinctions often serve to reinforce societal power structures. Evil itself is a contested concept. Augustine of Hippo defined it as a privation of good, lacking independent existence, while dualistic traditions like Zoroastrianism see evil as an active force. Thinkers such as Nietzsche critique these binaries as cultural constructs, underscoring the relative nature of evil. In many pre-Christian and indigenous traditions, magic was considered a neutral force, with its morality dependent on intent and context. However, monotheistic religions like Christianity and Islam demonized magic, associating it with diabolic forces. Texts like the Malleus Maleficarum cemented this link during the European witch hunts, leading to the persecution of those, particularly women, accused of witchcraft. Modern pagan and esoteric traditions challenge this narrative, rejecting binary moralities and framing magic as a source of empowerment and spiritual growth. Figures like Aleister Crowley reinterpreted magic as a neutral tool for self-realization, shifting the discourse away from traditional associations with evil. So, as you can tell, today's episode embarks on a dual inquiry. First, it interrogates the historical and theological construction of magic as evil, focusing on the socio-political and religious forces that shaped this narrative. Second, it critically examines the nature of evil itself, questioning whether it is an inherent quality or a culturally relative concept. By integrating these perspectives from monotheistic and polytheistic traditions, as well as philosophical and esoteric discourses, I'm hoping to provide a comprehensive or good enough overview of the complex interplay between magic and the idea of evil. But before we dive into today's discussion, I'd love to remind you that this project of delivering free, academically grounded knowledge based on peer-reviewed scholarship on all topics in esotericism can only exist thanks to your support. So yeah, I don't have a fancy sponsor. You guys are my sponsor. And you are the ones that keep this project alive. So if you have the means and want to keep this project going, I would really appreciate it if you sustain it on PayPal, joining my growing community on Patreon. We have monthly lectures, a Discord server, a book club. We have like lots of things. You would love it there if you joined, and you would love the people there because they are all kindred spirit. Also, you can support me by super thanking me in the comments on Coffee and checking out my services at drangelapuka.com. You can get one-to-one conversations with me, tutoring sessions. You can get my courses, individual lectures, and so on. So please check it out. And don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. It's free and gives you access to exclusive content. And also, you will always be up to date with everything that I'm up to at the moment. Now, back to our topic. To understand the association between magic and evil, it is essential to interrogate the concept of evil itself. The notion of evil is neither universal nor monolithic. It varies significantly across philosophical systems, religious traditions, and cultural contexts. So let's explore three primary dimensions of evil: its philosophical, theological, and anthropological constructions. Philosophically, the Western intellectual tradition has grappled with the problem of evil for millennia. In classical antiquity, Plato and Aristotle regarded evil as a deficiency or failure to achieve the ideal forms or virtues. This conception heavily influenced Christian theologians such as Augustine of Hippo, who articulated the privation theory of evil, or privatio boni. Augustine argued that evil is not a substance, but the absence of good, likening it to darkness, which has no independent existence but is simply absence of light. In this framework, evil is understood as the corruption of divine order rather than an active opposing force. This view was later expanded by Thomas Aquinas, who integrated Aristotelian metaphysics into Christian theology, further emphasizing that evil lacks an ontological foundation. However, alternative philosophical perspectives challenged this privative view. Friedrich Nietzsche, for instance, dismissed the binary construction of good and evil as a construct of Judeo-Christian morality, which he viewed as a tool for the suppression of individual will and vitality. For Nietzsche, the moral framework of evil is an artificial construct imposed by systems of power rather than a reflection of inherent qualities in the world. Similarly, Hannah Arendt's study of the Holocaust led her to articulate the concept of the banality of evil, arguing that evil is not always the result of profound malice, but can stem from thoughtlessness and uncritical obedience to authority. In theological context, the conceptualization of evil takes on a more cosmic dimension. In monotheistic traditions such as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, evil is often personified and linked to the figure of the devil or Satan. In Jewish theology, the role of Ha-Satan in the Hebrew Bible is not that of an inherently evil being, but a divine adversary who tests human faith and morality, as seen in the Book of Job. This more ambivalent portrayal contrasts with later Christian theology, where Satan becomes a fallen angel and the personification of ultimate evil. The Christian tradition further embeds the concept of evil in the doctrine of original sin, with Augustine asserting that humanity's fall from grace introduced moral corruption into the world. In Islam, evil is similarly framed as a test of fate, with Shaitan acting as a tempter rather than an omnipotent force. Evil in these traditions is not an independent principle, but a deviation from divine will, often linked to human free will and disobedience. Dualistic religious systems, such as Zoroastrianism, present a strikingly different view of evil. In Zoroastrian cosmology, evil is embodied by Angra Mainyu, or Ahriman, who exists in direct opposition to Ahura Mazda, the god of light and wisdom. This cosmology posits a perpetual struggle between good and evil, with human beings playing an active role in tipping the balance through their moral choices. This dualism contrasts with the monotheistic emphasis on a singular divine source and the relative subservience of evil within the cosmic order. Anthropologically, cross-cultural studies reveal that notions of evil are profoundly shaped by cultural norms, values, and systems of belief. Claude Lévi-Strauss and his structuralist analysis of myths highlight how many cultures conceptualize evil through binary oppositions such as purity versus pollution or order versus chaos. Mary Douglas's seminal work Purity and Danger from 1966 explores how acts or entities labeled as evil often transgress societal taboos or threaten established categories of thought. In this view, evil is less about inherent malevolence and more about the disruption of social or cosmic equilibrium. The association of magic with evil becomes intelligible when examined through these lenses. In monotheistic frameworks, magic is often constructed as a transgressive force that challenges divine authority, aligning it with moral corruption or even diabolic intent. This is evident in the biblical injunctions against sorcery in texts such as Deuteronomy 18:10-12, which explicitly condemn magical practices as abominations before God. Conversely, in polytheistic and animistic systems, magic is frequently amoral, its ethical value contingent upon the practitioner's intent and the social context. In these traditions, the notion of evil magic often reflects a breach of communal norms or an attempt to harm others, rather than an inherent quality of the practice itself. As we proceed to examine the historical and cultural dimensions of the association between magic and evil, we need to underscore the relativity of evil as a concept. Whether framed as a privation of good, a cosmic adversary, or a transgressive force, evil is not a static category but a dynamic construct that reveals much about the values and anxieties of the societies that define it. This relativism is critical for understanding how and why magic has been stigmatized as evil in certain contexts while celebrated as sacred or neutral in others. The historical association of magic with evil emerges as a product of cultural, religious, and political forces, deeply tied to shifts in societal norms and the consolidation of authority. We now explore the evolution of this relationship from antiquity through the medieval and early modern periods, focusing on the demonization of magic within monotheistic frameworks and its persistence as a tool for marginalization. In antiquity, magic occupied a complex and ambivalent space in the cultural imagination. In Mesopotamian and Egyptian societies, magical practices were integrated into religious and medical systems, often performed by priests or other authorized practitioners. Magic could be used to heal, protect, or curse, with its moral status determined by the practitioner's intent and the outcome. Egyptian texts such as the Book of the Dead contain numerous spells aimed at securing safe passage to the afterlife, demonstrating magic's sacred role in these traditions. However, even in these cultures, the misuse of magic, such as for malevolent sorcery, could lead to social condemnation, revealing an early tension between magic as a neutral tool and its potential alignment with harmful intent. The Greco-Roman world introduced a more formal dichotomy between natural and illicit magic. Philosophers like Plato and later Neoplatonists, including Iamblichus, distinguished between divine theurgy, ritual practices intended to connect with higher spiritual realms, and sorcery, which was seen as self-serving and morally suspect. Roman law codified these distinctions with accusations of maleficium, or harmful magic, carrying severe punishments. Yet magic was not universally condemned. The Hermetic corpus, for example, framed certain magical practices as vehicles for divine knowledge, illustrating that the perception of magic's morality was heavily dependent on the context. The advent of Christianity marked a significant shift in the moral framing of magic. Early Christian theologians, including Augustine, associated magical practices with pagan idolatry, interpreting them as a rejection of divine authority and an invocation of demonic powers. Augustine's De Doctrina Christiana explicitly links all non-Christian rituals, including magical practices, with the work of fallen angels. This conflation of magic with the demonic was reinforced by biblical injunctions against witchcraft and sorcery, such as Exodus 22:18. Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live. During the medieval period, the association of magic with evil became increasingly institutionalized, particularly within the context of church authority. Scholarly debates over natural versus demonic magic persisted, with figures like Thomas Aquinas delineating a boundary between natural phenomena, which could be studied through divine reason, and supernatural acts, which were viewed as potentially diabolical. By the 12th and 13th centuries, magic associated with learned texts, such as astrology and alchemy, was sometimes tolerated, provided it was framed as a pursuit of divine wisdom. However, folk practices, particularly those associated with women, were often viewed with suspicion and associated with malevolence, especially when they had to do with communing with spirits. The late medieval period witnessed the escalation of these anxieties into outright persecution. The Malleus Maleficarum from 1487, written by Heinrich Kramer and Jakob Sprenger, became a defining text in the witch hunt era. This treatise framed witches as individuals, often women, who had made pacts with the devil in exchange for supernatural powers, using these abilities to harm their communities. The text codified the perception of magic as inherently evil and justified the violent suppression of perceived practitioners. As Brian Leavick notes, the European witch hunts were not only theological in nature but also deeply political, serving as mechanisms to reinforce patriarchal and state power. In contrast to the monotheistic demonization of magic, many polytheistic and indigenous traditions retained a more ambivalent or positive view of magical practices. In African indigenous religions, for example, magic is often embedded in communal rituals and viewed as a tool for maintaining harmony with ancestors and spiritual forces. While harmful magic, such as witchcraft, may be condemned, the practice itself is not inherently evil, but judged by its consequences. Similarly, in pre-Christian European traditions, magic was often a sacred act performed by druids, shamans, or other spiritual intermediaries, and focused on healing, divination, or ensuring agricultural fertility. Often practices that were stigmatized were the practices of the other, because magic has also very often been used as a term of othering. So the gods and spirits of the other are somewhat demonic or evil, and the religious practices or magic practices of the other, the other culture, not our own, would also be considered as something to be stigmatized. The Enlightenment brought new perspectives to the discourse on magic and evil. As rationalism began to dominate intellectual thought, magic was increasingly dismissed as superstition rather than demonology. Figures such as Giordano Bruno and later Aleister Crowley sought to reclaim magic as a spiritual and intellectual pursuit, redefining it outside the framework of good versus evil. Crowley, in particular, reframed magic, which he spells with a K, as a practice of self-realization, famously declaring, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." This recontextualization marked a departure from the moral dichotomies of earlier centuries and highlights the autonomy and agency of the practitioner. The historical association of magic with evil then is far from universal or static. It reflects broader cultural anxieties about power, authority, and the boundaries of the sacred. By understanding the context in which magic has been framed as evil, whether through theological condemnation, legal codification, or social ostracization, we gain insight into the dynamic interplay between morality, religion, and cultural identity. Having traced the historical and cultural association of magic with evil, it is crucial now to interrogate the relative nature of evil and explore how various traditions conceptualize magic as morally neutral, beneficial, or harmful. The relative nature of evil is evident in traditions where magic is viewed not as inherently malevolent, but as a neutral force subject to human intent. In polytheistic systems, such as those of the ancient Greeks, Romans, and Celts, magical practices often occupied a liminal space. For example, the ancient Greek deity Hecate, associated with crossroads, liminality, and necromancy, was neither entirely benevolent nor malevolent. Hecate's role in magical practices demonstrates that magic was seen as a potent tool, its moral balance contingent upon how it was wielded. In contrast, the binary construction of magic as good or evil is more pronounced in monotheistic traditions. Christianity, Judaism, and Islam often frame magic within the broader narrative of divine versus demonic forces. Yet, even within these traditions, distinctions are drawn between permissible and impermissible magical acts. Jewish mysticism, particularly Kabbalah, includes practices such as the use of amulets, which are considered protective rather than harmful. In Christianity, debates over natural magic emerged in the Renaissance, with figures like Marsilio Ficino and Giovanni Pico della Mirandola arguing that certain magical practices aligned with divine wisdom and were therefore not evil. These debates reveal a persistent tension within monotheistic frameworks between condemning magic and recognizing its potential as a divine tool. In indigenous and shamanistic traditions, magic is frequently embedded in communal and cosmological systems. For example, in African religious systems, practitioners use rituals, charms, and invocations to align themselves with ancestral and spiritual forces. While harmful magic, often labeled as witchcraft, may be condemned, the act of practicing magic itself is morally neutral. The distinction lies in whether the practice seeks to harm others or uphold communal harmony. This perspective underscores the contextual nature of morality in magic, challenging Western narratives that categorize magic as intrinsically evil. The fluidity of magic's moral categorization is also evident in Hinduism and Buddhism. Hindu traditions frequently employ rituals and mantras to invoke deities and achieve specific outcomes, blending magic with devotional practices. These acts are not considered evil, but part of the cosmic order. In Buddhism, the figure of Mara, often described as the tempter or personification of desire, is not a force of intrinsic evil, but a manifestation of human attachment and ignorance, which impede enlightenment. This understanding reframes harmful actions, including those performed through magic, as stemming from a lack of spiritual clarity rather than an inherent moral failing. Modern esoteric traditions and contemporary paganism further emphasize the moral relativity of magic. The Wiccan Rede, with its "and it harm none, do what ye will," encapsulates the principle that magic is not evil but must be ethically guided. These contrast sharply with Christian demonological narratives that equate all magical practices with the diabolic. Aleister Crowley's reinterpretation of magic as magic with a K sought to divorce the practice from moral binaries altogether. In Magic in Theory and Practice, Crowley defined magic as the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will, a definition that places agency and intent at the center of magical morality. For Crowley, magic was a tool for spiritual and psychological transformation, not an inherently good or evil act. The association of magic with evil is thus not an inherent truth, but a cultural and historical construct. It reflects broader societal anxieties about power, transgression, and the unknown. By deconstructing this binary, we can view magic not as intrinsically evil, but as a practice whose moral value is deeply context dependent. As Mary Douglas argued in Purity and Danger, the labeling of actions or practices as evil often reflects their perceived transgression of social boundaries rather than any inherent quality. Magic as a liminal practice frequently occupies such transgressive spaces, making it a focal point for moral and cultural contestation. This relativist perspective invites us to reconsider how we define and categorize moral acts, particularly in the context of practices that lie outside dominant cultural norms. It challenges the assumption that magic must be inherently aligned with evil and instead encourages a nuanced understanding of its role as a cultural and spiritual tool, shaped by the intentions of its practitioners and the context in which it operates. The historical and cultural framing of magic as evil is not a universal phenomenon, but a dynamic construct shaped by specific contexts. To illustrate this, we look now at three case studies: the portrayal of magic in the Book of Enoch, the witch trials of early modern Europe, and Aleister Crowley's reclamation of magic as a neutral or empowering force. These examples highlight how the concept of evil is applied to magic and how magic's moral categorization evolves over time and across cultures. The Book of Enoch, a Second Temple Jewish text, provides an early example of the alignment of magic with corruption and moral transgression. Central to the narrative is the story of the Watchers, a group of fallen angels who defy divine law by descending to earth, mating with human women, and teaching forbidden knowledge to humanity. This knowledge includes metallurgy, weapon making, cosmetics, astrology, and sorcery, all of which are framed as disruptions of the divine order. I must disrupt the divine order a lot with my makeup, but anyway. So Enoch 7:1-6 and 8 1 to 3 describe how the Watchers' actions corrupted humanity, leading to the proliferation of sin and eventual divine retribution through the flood. In this narrative, magic, particularly in the form of esoteric knowledge, is explicitly linked to evil, not because of the practices themselves, but because of their association with rebellion against divine authority. The story reflects broader concerns in Jewish theology about the dangers of knowledge that transcends human boundaries. This demonization of magic as a tool of fallen angels influenced later Christian thought, particularly during the Middle Ages, when sorcery and witchcraft were often interpreted as acts of diabolic collaboration. The European witch trials of the 15th to the 17th centuries provide a stark example of how magic was systematically framed as evil within a specific sociopolitical and religious context. Central to this phenomenon was the rise of demonology and the publication of the Malleus Maleficarum in 1487 by Heinrich Kramer and Jakob Sprenger. The text argued that witches were individuals who had made pacts with the devil, gaining supernatural powers in exchange for their souls. These accusations were rooted in theological assumptions about the alignment of magic with satanic forces, as well as sociopolitical anxieties about gender, power, and community cohesion. The witch trials disproportionately targeted women, particularly those who were marginalized or economically vulnerable. This gendered aspect of the trials has been explored by feminist scholars, who argue that the association of women with magic and evil reflects patriarchal anxieties about female autonomy and power. Importantly, many of the practices condemned as witchcraft were mundane acts of healing, midwifery, or folk magic. The trials reveal how the concept of evil can be weaponized to control and oppress, often targeting practices that fall outside dominant cultural or religious norms. In stark contrast to the demonization of magic seen in the Book of Enoch and witch trials, Aleister Crowley sought to redefine magic as a morally neutral practice focused on personal empowerment and spiritual transformation. Crowley's philosophy, articulated in works such as Magic in Theory and Practice, rejects the binary of good versus evil, emphasizing individual will as the guiding principle of magical practice. For Crowley, magic is the science and art of causing change to occur in conformity with will. This framing situates magic not as a tool of rebellion or malevolence, but as a method for achieving one's true purpose or true will. Crowley's writings often reflect his rejection of Christian moral dichotomies, particularly the association of pleasure and power with sin. His concept of therema, encapsulated in the phrase, "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," positions magic as a tool for self-realization and liberation from societal constraints. While controversial, Crowley's work has had a profound impact on modern esoteric traditions, inspiring movements such as Wicca, chaos magic, and thelema itself. His reclamation of magic demonstrates how the moral framing of magic can shift, depending on the cultural and philosophical framework in which it is situated. These case studies demonstrate that the moral framing of magic is deeply contingent on context. In the Book of Enoch, magic is condemned as a transgression of divine law, reflecting anxieties about forbidden knowledge. During the European witch trials, the association of magic with diabolism served as a tool for social control, targeting those deemed threatening to the patriarchal and religious order. Conversely, Crowley's reclamation of magic as a neutral and empowering force highlights the potential for reinterpreting practices that were once condemned as evil. Each case also illustrates the relative nature of evil. In the Book of Enoch, the Watchers' teachings are seen as evil because they disrupt divine order. But in other traditions, such as Hermeticism, the pursuit of esoteric knowledge is framed as a sacred endeavor. Similarly, the healing and folk practices condemned during witch trials were not inherently evil, but became so through their association with diabolic narratives. Crowley's work challenges these narratives entirely, redefining magic outside the dichotomy of good and evil. So, the association of magic with evil is a construct deeply embedded in cultural, religious, and historical frameworks, and reflects broader anxieties about power, transgression, and morality. However, as we have explored, neither magic nor evil are static or universally defined concepts. Instead, they are fluid categories whose meanings have shifted over time, shaped by the interplay of theological doctrines, philosophical reflections, and sociopolitical contexts. The philosophical exploration of evil reveals a spectrum of interpretations, from Augustine's privation theory, which sees evil as a lack or corruption of good, to Nietzsche's radical critique of moral dichotomies as constructs of power. These frameworks demonstrate that the concept of evil is far from universal and instead reflects the values and priorities of specific cultural and intellectual traditions. This variability in defining evil is mirrored in the treatment of magic. In many cultures, magic has been perceived not as inherently evil, but as a neutral or even sacred practice, dependent on intent and context. Conversely, in monotheistic systems such as Christianity and Islam, magic has often been framed as a transgression against divine authority, aligning it with diabolic forces. The historical association of magic with evil reached its peak during the witch trials of early modern Europe, where magic became a scapegoat for societal tensions and a tool for enforcing patriarchal and religious orthodoxy. Yet, this association was neither absolute nor uncontested. Renaissance thinkers like Ficino and Pico della Mirandola sought to reclaim magic as a form of divine wisdom, and modern historic figures like Aleister Crowley reframed it as a morally neutral spiritual technology. The case studies of the Book of Enoch, the European witch trials, and Crowley's Thelemic magic highlight the dynamic and contested nature of these concepts. The Book of Enoch demonizes magic as a corrupting force associated with rebellion against divine order, which shows early theological concerns about forbidden knowledge. The witch trials illustrate how the concept of evil can be weaponized to marginalize and control, targeting practices that challenge dominant social structures. Crowley's work, by contrast, demonstrates how the reclamation of magic can challenge traditional moral frameworks, redefining it as a practice of personal empowerment. Ultimately, the association of magic with evil reveals more about the societies that construct this link than about magic itself. The categorization of magic as good, evil, or neutral reflects deeper cultural anxieties about transgression, power, and the boundaries of the sacred. By examining these associations critically, we can move beyond simplistic binaries to appreciate the complex and multifaceted roles that magic plays in human culture and spirituality. I hope that I managed to illuminate the relativity of both magic and evil, encouraging a critical approach to these concepts. Rather than accepting moral binaries at face value, we must interrogate the historical, cultural, and philosophical context that shaped our understanding of them. Magic, like evil, is not a universal or fixed category, but a lens through which societies negotiate their values, fears, and aspirations. In questioning the assumption that magic is inherently evil, we are also invited to reconsider the nature of evil itself. Is it an absolute force, a relational construct, or a projection of human anxieties? These questions remain open, inviting us to further reflection and exploration. This is it for today's video. If you watched until this point, wow, you are really committed to your learning. I'm so proud of you. And leave me a witch emoji in the comments. Now, my dear Symposius, this project of delivering free academic knowledge based on peer-reviewed scholarship to all of you freely can only exist thanks to your support. So please, 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 if you have the means, help me out and support me via PayPal, joining my fantastic and growing Patreon community, super thanking me in the comments, checking out my services at drangelapuka.com. And you find all the links in bio, on screen, in the cards, in the info box, everywhere. So if you want to, you will find a way. Thank you so much for considering. And if you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, activate the notification bell so that you will always be notified when I upload a new video in case YouTube won't show it in your feeds. Leave me a comment because I really want to know what you thought about this video. And please, please, please share my videos around. I would really appreciate that. That's a free way for you to support me. And don't forget to sign up for my newsletter. That way you will always be up to date with everything that I'm up to, and you won't have to rely on capricious social media algorithms. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope that you stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now. Today we hold that we'll never